Welcome everyone. Very nice to see you all. I have a fly that has been with me here for a couple of days, and it seems to come always when it is the wrong time. So today we're going to do the last session of the series of 4 about becoming your own therapist. And maybe before we start, we do a little meditation, or we give ourselves a couple of minutes of time to relax, settle the mind, and get the mind focused on what we are doing tonight. Okay, so make sure that you sit comfortable. And when we have been quite busy before we sit down, it always takes a couple of minutes for the thoughts to fade away, for the body to relax. And in order to do that, just bring your mind to your body. Be present with your body. And if it is calming for you, you can focus on your breath. But the main thing is that you let your mind rest in the present moment. So let go of all the worries for what is still to come. And let go of all the things that didn't go well in the past, but you still maybe want to change them or fix them. But it's now not the time to do so. And then we can set a motivation for today. We are thinking about what we can do with our mind, how we can best relate to our mind so that the mind becomes more healthy, more in balance with our potential. And first of all, we do that for ourselves because we know that we are suffering from a mind like our mind, our uncontrolled mind. But we can also listen for others. Because if we know how to sort ourselves out, how to work with our own mind, we will have a very different influence on everyone around us. We will also be able to understand others much better. And so then our actions will become more skillful. And the tools that we're going to use in order to develop more qualities in our own mind, we can keep applying them for the rest of our life, keep improving our wisdom, our compassion, and with that our skillful means. And so then each and every sentient being that we meet, we have some tools to help them, to benefit them. And these qualities that we develop, especially the qualities of wisdom, they will come with us wherever we're going to go after this life. And so then we can continue to benefit. And so then try to think that you're going to listen to the teachings in order to develop your potential of wisdom and compassion, so that you can be of greatest benefit to all sentient beings. And then we can relax the mind. I'm going to put on the fan here because otherwise the fly is going to be with me the whole time. So I'm going to trust that you don't hear the fan. Otherwise you tell me and I'll turn it off and I'll deal with the fly. So last time we started to make a start with how can we take care of our own mind, in the sense of when disturbing emotions arise, what are all the possibilities that we have in order to counteract the disturbing emotions, in order to make sure that we don't engage in actions that are going to be harmful for ourselves and for others. And from an email from Glennis, I got the impression that it might have been a bit too much or too fast. So I've written some things down, and I hope you all got that. Did you? Yes? Okay. So we just go slowly, we go over it, not slowly, but we go over it just to refresh the mind, and so that you know what I'm referring to. And if you feel that you want to go deeper into the material, I would say watch the video from last week. And then with that paper, it maybe it's not so overwhelming. So I'll put it on. Let me have a look to share that paper. Here it is. Oops. All right. So you can see that. So we started to talk about What is the cause of all our suffering? And suffering includes all our problems. Where are they coming from? And then we said in Buddhism, the cause of suffering is said to be karma and delusions. So we looked into, okay, what can we do with our karma if we want to create less causes for suffering? So we said then you need to abstain from the 10 non-virtuous actions and engage in the 10 virtuous actions. And in general, you can say working for the benefit of others is almost a very simple, it's not a shortcut, but if you think, oh, I find it difficult to remember all these non-virtues and the virtues, if you think I'm doing actions out of benefit for others, then automatically, your actions will be virtuous. So that in terms of actions. And then we also said that instead of being focused on I want to feel good, you say, well, whatever I feel is already coming from actions that I created in the past and they're now finished. Better to focus on my actions so that I look at the causes for my feelings in the future. Remember? Yeah, you can go, if you now think, oh, what is she talking about? Go back to the previous video. And so then we looked into the delusions, because delusions come up in our mind all the time. And when there is a problem, when we feel that something is a problem, delusions are already in the mind. And they are in the mind in a way that it is confusing, that it is unpleasant, that it is... we might have the feeling we're not in control. So what we did is we looked at what kind of antidotes can you apply when that happens. And we talked about the general antidotes. So bringing the mind to the present moment, because in the present moment, delusions cannot be produced. So staying with the present moment, observing your feelings, not following your feelings, but observing your feelings. And then being accepting and non-judgmental for whatever arises in the mind. Don't say, oh, there you go again, and oh, you're so stupid, and you should have, and that's all not helpful. That is actually creating more, what we say, mental engagement, in the sense that you create more suffering for yourself when you do that. And so we talked a little bit about self-compassion, when unpleasant feelings arise, or when suffering arises, or when problems arise, talk in a kind way to yourself. You are already suffering. You don't have to add to that. And also when we are suffering, sometimes we have this feeling, it is just me. We feel disconnected from everybody else. So remember, it's not just you. This is just an experience that so many human beings have. You're not alone in that. Somehow it helps to diffuse our unpleasant feelings. And so then we can challenge our beliefs in the delusion, like, is that really true what you're telling me? Sometimes we have these scenarios happening in our mind that, oh, everything is going to go wrong and we're going to lose everything. And, when there is strong delusion, it is always about everything, never, all the time. When we say these things to ourselves, we are already exaggerating. So when you hear yourself say that, check, do a reality check. Is that really true? Is that really true, what I'm feeling, what I'm thinking? Is it? Because most of the time it's not, And if you can find a way to have a little bit of a different perspective, that already helps to counteract the delusion. One of the forces of the delusion is your belief in it. And the stronger you believe in it, the more you hold on to it, the more control it has over you. So if you can see that a perspective of your delusion might not necessarily be true, yes, you feel it today like that, but if you are tomorrow in a different state of mind, you might see it very different. If you can just see that, that already takes a lot of power away from the delusion. And so you can also remember the nature of the mind, that things arise in the mind, but that's not who you are. That's not what your mind is. And then we spoke a little bit about cultivating an antidote to specific delusions. And so in Tibetan Buddhism, they do always, what are the disadvantages of that? What are the advantages of that? So you can contemplate like that. What is the disadvantage of anger? What is the advantage of practicing patience, practicing loving kindness? And then you think deeply about anger and the harm that it does, and how when we have patience and loving kindness, that mind doesn't have so much power. So we start training that when we sit on the cushion or when we are not in a difficult situation, right? We don't wait till the anger arises, because once it arises, we have no chance. But when we practice beforehand, maybe if you have a situation in which a lot of anger arose, you can go back to that situation, to the memory of that situation, and then think, how could I have done that differently? Or what would happen with that when I have more patience, when my mind wouldn't be so disturbed, when I have more loving kindness? Or you can practice in the way that you think, maybe you're a little bit irritated with someone and you want to talk to that person, and you think, well, that could go in the wrong way and I might become angry. So how can I prepare myself right now so that when I'm in the conversation, my mind will stay undisturbed no matter what happens, and I will keep thinking that I want that person to be happy. Then anger doesn't have so much chance. Then when it still arises, we could say, can we continue this conversation another time? And you try to walk away, because as soon as anger arises, it is quite easy for the anger to take over. And when anger takes over, we start saying things that we afterwards regret. We might, we can destroy even long-term relationships very easily with anger. So when you see anger arising, give yourself permission that you can walk away. But say to the person, I will come back to you, but now it's better if we stop this conversation. All right, that's taking control. And so now we said a little bit about attachment and the antidotes to attachment, which is reflecting on impermanence of everything, impermanence of our feelings, impermanence of all the things or the people that we are attached to, impermanence of our own body, impermanence of our own state of mind. No matter how much suffering we have, no matter how angry we are, no matter what kind of big problem there is in the mind, the nature of all that is that it is impermanent. Which means that the causes for it to arise have been generated, and the problem or the state of mind already has arisen. And it only takes time for it to change. Right? Often we think, I have to change this. But many times, sometimes I wonder, if this is one of the problems that we have, or one of the wrong ideas that we have. Sometimes I think if there is a problem and we start fighting with the problem or trying to solve the problem, we might make the problem actually bigger because we are engaging so much with it. While whatever arose comes from causes and conditions. And stepping back and just observing it and allowing it to be there might be much more a more beneficial tool to let the problem go. Because once causes and conditions are have ripened, then it is only a matter of time for the things to fall apart. You know, sometimes when anger arises in the mind, I don't know if you have ever observed that, and if not, I would encourage you to try. You know, when anger arises in the mind and we say, okay, there was anger and that's okay, but I'm not going to say anything about the situation. I just know that it hurts me deeply. I get angry about it and I'm going to leave it. And so you're not going to comment on your own contribution. You're not going to comment on what you think is happening. You're not going to comment. You don't give any comments. You walk away and say, that karma is finished. I don't have to do anything with that. If you can really do that, you know, it just passes. And then if you can meet that person the next time and pretend that nothing has happened, you know, you have let it go, really let it go. You can just move on. But if you start thinking about it, and then you want to get back to that person, or you want to discuss it, or you want to understand it, or you want to, it can actually be that you contribute to the problem. So, and sometimes there might be some benefit in doing that. But you have to check, you know. Often it is our anger that just wants to be right. Anger wants to be right. So anger will keep going until you are right and other people tell you that you are right. So you want to prevent that, you know. And a good way of doing that, I think, is that you think, how can we both be right? If you are really right, you know, but you have no anger, you do not have the need to be right in the eyes of the other person. But if you want the other person to acknowledge that you were right and they were wrong, that's anger at work. You know, and if you have even more skills than not needing to be right, you can maybe find a reason why that other person is right in what they are doing. And you tell them that. Doesn't mean that they are right in the whole situation, but you can see that from their perspective, it's very understandable that they have been acting in the way they have. Right? Wanting to be right is a problem for us, isn't it? If we are right, the other person is wrong. Then the other person has to sit with, I'm wrong, you know, and we know how that feels. That feels awful. So try not to go there. Try to respect that in the other person, that we all have to be right. All right, that's what I'm going to say about anger. I mean, time goes so quick. I can't believe it. So that was about anger, but it was in relation to impermanence, that everything is impermanent and that everything goes. And so reflecting impermanence in order to counteract attachment is that attachment believes somehow that all these beautiful things that we would like to have, or the beautiful person that we want to be with, that they're going to be like that forever. Have you ever noticed that? It's going to be like that forever. And then when things change, we don't understand. Right? If you have a brand new car and then somebody comes and makes a scratch on it, it hurts, and you think, how is that possible? You know, the car is new. How can that happen? But the car is impermanent, so everything can happen. So the more that you see that things are impermanent, people are impermanent, relationships are impermanent, we are impermanent, things become less important. to have, to be with. You know, we can see that when we have it, it's nice. When we don't have it, it's also okay. Right? That's where you want to go. And so then you get to practicing contentment. Being happy with what you have. And attachment is what makes that we incarnate in this body, right? Attachment is the reason that we are attracted to this body and to the mind that we have. And so attachment is what brings us to this life. And often attachment feels like, when I have a lot of attachment in my mind, I feel alive, you know? Do you know that? Have you ever noticed that? Sometimes you feel like, oh, you know, if life is boring and not much is happening and you don't feel a lot, you go out and you try to get some kind of stimulus, whether that is a good meal, whether that is, you know, running on the beach, whether that is, you want to have some feelings be stimulated. You have an attachment to feeling that you are alive. That's really how attachment looks like. Attachment always looks like that's who we are, you know, because it is so at the basis of all our needs, all our wants, all the things that we do automatically during the day, all coming from attachment. That is what keeps us going. And so they say in Buddhism, in order to remove attachment, or now it's like oil in a cloth. The oil is completely absorbed in the whole structure of the cloth. And so attachment is absorbed in the whole structure that we have of life, you know, the mental structure that we have of life, of who we are, how we believe we exist. Everywhere attachment is involved, holding on to life. And so to counteract attachment, when we start talking about letting go of attachment, often we hear, oh, I have to give up my happiness, you know, or I have to get, life is going to be so boring and nothing is going to happen and it is plain and it is, attachment is what makes life more juicy, what makes life more exciting. And so we need to work with that for a while and to really see that, well, attachment appears like that. But if we go a little bit deeper and look into the nature of attachment, when attachment is at work, we also always have the feeling that there is no satisfaction. You know, one more. Look at children, one more. And then when you have given them the one more, they want one more. Always wanting a little bit more is coming from attachment. And so attachment gives the feeling that something is missing. Things are not complete. I want something more. When you have that feeling, you know attachment is there. And no matter how much you give to your attachment, it is never enough. It is never perfect. Always something not right. Oh, if I just also had this, then it would be perfect. But it never is. So I'm gonna back to the big screen, and we keep reading on the pages, but you can do that for yourself. That was just from the last time. So look into attachment. And I think the book from Lama Zopa Rinpoche called Practicing Dharma, he explains really, really well how attachment actually is a burden for our mind. You know, it appears as that what brings us happiness, but it is actually bringing us a lot of suffering that we do not recognize as suffering. All right. So that's what we do with attachment. And then we can go a little bit deeper, and then we go to the root cause of attachment and aversion. And the root cause of our delusions is described by all Buddhist schools as the grasping at a self. So we hold ourselves to exist in a way that is not in accordance with reality. We add qualities to our own existence which are not there in actuality. And so on the basis of that, delusions arise. And also the delusions, they are not in accordance with reality. So that self-grasping, grasping at a self, that is the ignorance that we have. And that ignorance is like a veil. You know, it's like, because we have that ignorance, we cannot see the nature of reality. We can think about it, but we can't see it directly. And so we are ignorant with respect to the conventional nature of reality, which is, you know, how all things appear to us. And we are ignorant with respect to the ultimate nature of reality. And so we're going to look at how can we work within the conventional reality, and how can we work with this on the ultimate, on the level of the ultimate reality. And so some things you might maybe feel, oh, that's too difficult for me, or I'm not interested in that yet, or, you know, but on the conventional level, you can do actually a lot in order to counteract the self-grasping mind. So I'll try to explain that, how that works. So thinking about reality, thinking about a self-grasping mind has everything to do with our wisdom mind. How do I see myself? And how does the self exist? So how can I look at reality so that my perspective is more coming from how things exist in actuality? So I'm trying to align my thinking with how the reality is. And although due to my ignorance, I will not be able to see that reality, when my thinking is more in line with reality, then my disturbing emotions will not be able to arise so often. And also when we are more in line with reality, when we think more in line with reality, the suffering cannot arise, because suffering only arises when we make up stories that have no foundation in reality. So if we look into the conventional nature of all things, you know, for us, that is actually the only reality that we have. For us, conventional nature is ultimate, because it's the only thing we have. We know from the holy beings that there is another reality that we cannot see at the moment. But we don't have that. You know, if I'm going to go around on the street and say there is another reality, they might pick me up and take me to the mental hospital, right? Because people say there is only one reality. That is what we see now, and that's it. But if we think about reality, you know, if we would really know conventional reality, then by now, I think we should know how to create causes for happiness. And I don't know, I'm always puzzled by life, you know, maybe the last few years, maybe not so much anymore, but for years it was like, what am I doing wrong, you know? I'm trying this, I'm trying that, I'm trying this. Other people seem to be happy when they're doing that. And somehow for me, it never worked. What is going wrong? No matter, I feel like I do not have the recipe how I need to do things in order to be happy. So that is very much related to the workings of karma. I do not understand karma. And I might say, well, I don't believe in karma, you know. But maybe we have to try. If you know that you do not know how to create your own happiness, then maybe you give karma a try and see if things change. So you can think about karma. Bring your actions more in accordance with how the universe works. Whatever you give out, you will get back. right? So if you don't want certain things to happen to you, stop doing them to others. We know these laws, no? We have heard about them in our maybe other religions or in our perspectives. So we also do not know about past and future lives. You know, if you have a very limited existence, I am just this life. There is nothing else. We can't see past and future lives. So then we start saying, oh, then I have to believe in past and future lives. I have no reasons for it, but I have to believe it. But in Buddhism, and maybe it is too much to go into that in detail, you know, in Buddhism there are reasons why there are past and future lives. And so by thinking about the reasons and by doing certain meditations, you can get a feel of past and future lives. That might actually be a possibility. And if there are past and future lives, what we can do is we can open up the mind. You know, it is not all about today. What is happening today? You know, even when something bad happens, when something happens today, in the big perspective, even the big perspective of this life, it might be this big. But then if we take the perspective of past and future lives, you know, what happens is nothing. It has happened many times to us. It will happen many times to us. So reflecting on that will help you to get a different perspective of conventional reality. And so then your actions will be less exaggerated, more in accordance with what is aligned with reality. So we think about that. And then if we think about ultimate nature of reality, then we need to first understand how we believe things exist in actuality. And then we have to check if that is true or not. So if I think about myself and I think about how do I exist, you know, I always have this feeling of a self, an entity, a person. I think the self is the best word, I, as if there is an entity in me that is in control, that is independent of anything else, that is independent actually of my body and my mind, that is in control, that is almost like I can rely upon that. It is there every day. It feels like it is there every day in the same way, like it is not changing, like it is permanent. And it is a one thing, a one self, right? So we say in Buddhism, we have an appearance of the self as if it is a unitary, a one thing, a unitary, permanent, independent self. The self appears to us like that, independent of body and mind, independent of causes and conditions, independent of the name that is given to it. Right? This self, we have to think, how does it appear to me? It appears like that. And then we have to say, can it exist like that? Can a self exist independent of the body and the mind in a permanent way, unitary? And so we do all kinds of investigations, which is related to meditation on emptiness. How do you meditate on emptiness? So when we meditate on emptiness, we use our reasoning mind, you know, because we cannot see the emptiness, we cannot see the lack of such a permanent, unitary, independent self. So we use reasoning. And I give you just one as an example. If that self would exist as a unitary thing, then it should be the same as the body and the mind, or it should be something different than the body and the mind. So if it is something different from the body and the mind, we should be able to think about the self without calling to mind our body and mind. But when we think about the self, there is always the body and the mind is there as well, isn't it? If you think about somebody that you know, you always bring to mind their body, and you bring to mind a characteristic maybe of their mind. But you cannot think about a person without calling to mind the body and the mind. True? So if the self was really different from the body and the mind, we wouldn't need the body and mind to think about a person. So then you would have to say, okay, it is not something different from the body and the mind. So then the other option is the self is the same as the body and the mind. You know? So you have one self. And then you have a body that is just from this life, that is made out of physical matter. And then you have a mind which goes from life to life, which is made out of consciousness. And you call that a one thing, you know. But at the end of life, they split up and they go each their own way. So where is your self going? Is it going with the body or is it going with the mind? So then you say, oh, it's going with the mind. So then that means that your self is not the same as the body. But the self is also the same as the body. Right? So you get into trouble. So you cannot say the self is just the body and the mind. And so in Buddhism, there are many reasonings that you apply, and we call that Chandrakirti, I'm not sure if he made it up or because what he said is coming from Nagarjuna. I think Nagarjuna had 4 reasonings in order to refute that the self is not the same as the body and the mind, and it is not to refute. It's not the same as the body and the mind, and it is also not something different from the body and the mind. And then Chandrakirti added a couple of reasonings. So there are the 7-fold reasoning of Chandrakirti, that when you study emptiness, you think about these reasonings, why what we believe we are cannot exist like that. Another way to make it more accessible is that you think, and this is not really meditating on emptiness, but it can be a help to go towards meditation on emptiness. If myself would exist as a permanent, independent, unitary self, I should be able to find it, either within my body or within my mind. And so then you start looking for it. Where is it? Where is it in your body? Where do you feel it? And can you feel it? Can you find it in the structure of your body? Can you find something in your body that you can call the I? And if you can't find it in the body, you investigate your mind. Which part of your mind is the I? Which part of your mind is the self? And so I think it's very useful to do this, but you will not be able to find anything that you can pinpoint and say, that is it. And so one way of saying that things do not exist as a permanent, unitary, independent self is that you say things do not exist inherently. Because if they would exist inherently, we would be able to find it within the object. So if myself would exist inherently, I would be able to find it within my body or within my mind. That is the definition of inherent existence, that you will be able to find it. So that is a way of reflecting on the ultimate nature of reality. And you can't do a lot of teachings, you know, on just on emptiness and how to apply the reasonings in order to develop a good understanding of emptiness. And so I can understand that for many this is difficult. And so what is more accessible, I think, you know, but maybe you check, is if we start thinking, okay, if things are not existing inherently, if things do not exist ultimately, then how do things exist conventionally? You know, whatever we see, ourselves, all the things, all the people, all whatever arises in our world, how does it exist? And so whatever arises in the world exists in dependence on causes and conditions. Whatever exists, whatever arises is impermanent by nature. Everything that is impermanent comes about due to causes and conditions. Everything that arises due to causes and conditions is changing momentarily, is changing in every moment. So this you can apply to everything around you, to everything that happens to you, to every state of mind that arises. As long as we are in samsara, any state of mind can arise. You know, we are not free of any delusion. We are not free of any tendency because we are in samsara, and due to causes and conditions, delusions will arise. So there you can be a little bit more gentle with yourself by saying, you know, this anger arises in the mind because of causes and conditions. That's not who I am. But the causes and conditions are in a way that I became so angry. And so then you can forgive yourself maybe better, let it go. You know, it just happened. But it doesn't define who you are. Same with being attached to things, you know, contemplate their impermanence. They come from causes and conditions. Same with relationships. You know, you have a wonderful relationship due to causes and conditions. And suddenly it turns the other way around and it becomes really bad due to causes and conditions. You know, maybe the karma for having that good relationship is finished. Maybe you didn't put enough effort in sustaining the relationship. Maybe you did, but the karma is finished anyway. You know, because things arise from causes and conditions. And so when you really apply that every day, every day, every day, your grasping mind will become less strong. You will be more able to let go, you know, and you start seeing that things are not so important maybe than you thought it was. So that can be helpful. And then in terms of that things do not exist inherently, but they exist by arising in dependence, we can think about that everything exists in dependence on the parts. And so normally His Holiness skips this one, you know, because this is yeah, maybe I won't go there. It is not so very important, but it can be helpful. For instance, if you think about your car, you know, car seems to be a real, truly existent car standing there on the street, your car. But if you start analyzing that object that is standing on the street, you will not find a car. You will not find one part of the car that you can call car. You can check each and every part of the car, and all the parts of the car are not car. And so all these things that are not car, they are put together, and we call it a car. So the car is something different than all the parts, because the parts are all not car. Right? But the parts of the car and the car, they are both needed for that object to come about, for the car to be there as it is. So you can see there is a whole, which is the car, and then there are all the parts, which are not car. We need them both for a car to exist. They depend upon each other. And so from that, you can go quite easily to that everything depends upon the mind labeling it. Right? So we can say all these parts of the car which are not car, in dependence on that, my mind creates an image of car and uses the term car, and then imputes that upon that object, upon all these parts which are not car. So everything that exists in that way, that we give a name to something, but that name given is not the same as all the parts coming together. The name is coming from the mind. The image is coming from the mind. Independence on parts which are not that. So in that way, everything comes from the mind. So how can we use that when we train our mind, or when we want to use it for suffering that arises in the mind, you know? So the suffering itself, we already label as suffering. And we are labeling it as something that we don't want. And we see it as something that we want to get rid of. And we see it as, you know, whoever inflicted that suffering on us, we see them in a negative light. That all comes from our mind. Suffering that arises, you know, we might not have so much control over that because it depends a lot on karma. Once the suffering arises, what we do with that, that fully depends upon our mind. How do I look at my suffering? How do I look at that event that is happening to me? How do I label that? If I can see some goodness in the suffering, my attitude towards the suffering will change. If I can see that suffering can help me to develop my wisdom mind, and I can fully accept the feelings that are arising, that I do not like, that are painful, but I feel that when I can sit with them, actually that will help me to connect with my wisdom mind. Then suffering can become something beneficial in my mind. And the more I can see the benefits of something, my aversion will lessen. Right? Because aversion arises when we see that something is harmful for us, when we perceive something to be harmful for us. Then aversion is there to say, oh, I want you to be separated from that. Let's separate. And we already have seen that that doesn't work, you know. when unpleasant feelings start to arise, the best way of being with them is that we allow them to fully arise so that they can dissolve back into the mind. So the better we find ways to say, okay, I'll welcome that, I'll take it, and find ways to sit with that, and can then see the benefit of that, the more healthy our mind will be. Can you see that? So meditating on dependent arising, you know, that is a huge, you can do that every day. When you walk in the street, when you're doing your work, when you think about where is this coming from, the causes and conditions. This was not always like that, you know. This didn't always exist. And so therefore it will not always exist. It will disappear again. So that's how you can apply it to your everyday life in every situation. And that will lessen your grasping at that things exist really, truly, as they appear to us. Once you see the dependent arising, you know, things are coming and going, you know, like a dream. They're not as real as they appear to us. And so that's one thing that we can do in order to counteract the self-grasping mind. And so that is our wisdom mind that we develop when we put attention to that aspect. And then we can also work on the self-cherishing mind. So in dependence on the self-grasping mind, the self-cherishing mind arises. And the self-cherishing mind is the mind that feels that I'm more important than you. Or my happiness is more important than your happiness. And that is an attitude. So even if we do not realize the nature of reality, or we find that difficult to go there, I would say try to do both, you know. But when we try to change the self-cherishing mind into a mind that is cherishing others, we are more working on our attitude, how we relate. So at the moment, how we function due to our self-cherishing mind, it's not just that my happiness is more important than other people's happiness, but I'm mainly concerned with the people that I like, that I have a good relationship with. And I'm not so concerned with the people that I do not know. And most of the time we actually do not care. And then with the people that I do not like, I might wish them suffering, right? We don't mind when they walk out of the street and they slip and fall down and we think, oh, you deserve that, right? This is the thoughts that arise in the mind. So that shows the self-cherishing mind. We are mainly concerned with ourselves and then with those that we love and like. Those we want them to be happy. Other people we don't care, or we even wish them to be unhappy. So we need to see that that attitude is actually causing a lot of problems for ourselves. That attitude is based on our attachment, based on our aversion, based on our delusions. If we want to have an attitude that is more in accordance with reality, then we would have to say, I depend upon all sentient beings. My happiness depends upon all sentient beings. It's not coming from nowhere. It's not coming from just from me, you know. Every time that I think it's coming from me, actually the self-grasping mind is at work, which is only causing problems, only causing suffering. Whatever happiness I experience, always others are involved. I depend upon others for my food. I depend upon others for my comforts. I depend upon others for a kind word. I depend upon others for any good feeling to arise, others are involved. So having an attitude that is more in accordance with reality is an attitude that recognizes that our happiness depends upon the kindness of others. And so from that, we try to develop a mind that wishes to repay that kindness. And so in order to overcome our biased mind, where attachment and aversion is ruling, we need to start thinking in a different way about sentient beings. And instead of thinking about sentient beings as, well, that sentient being is benefiting me, therefore I'll benefit the sentient being back, right? We need to recognize that actually all sentient beings are benefiting us. And what we need to do is that we recognize that our biased mind and the way we engage in relationships, these relationships, they are not lasting, right? They're changing all the time. And so today I have a good relationship with you, but tomorrow somebody might tell stories about me and you think, oh my gosh, no, we won't have her anymore, right? Relationship finished. Or, you know, there is a very bad relationship, you have a bad relationship with somebody and then something happens and that person is of great service to you. And you think, oh, actually, that's a very nice person, right? And if we look into our life, we can already see that many people were in our life and they left our life again. And there are still people coming into our life that we didn't know before. But once we start meeting them, we actually quite like them. And so relationships are changing all the time. And so if we use how we feel today as a measure whether we want to benefit someone or not, we are very limited in our actions. But if we can see that we have a relationship with each and every sentient being because of their kindness, and if we can see that all sentient beings are the same as me in that they all want to be happy, they all want to be free of suffering, right? Then from that contemplation, you can develop an attitude that is wishing to work for all sentient beings, to see all sentient beings as a friend. As Holiness sometimes says, you know, when I see sentient people, I always think I see an old friend. And he approaches you like you are his friend, even if he has never seen you. And if you feel what that does to you when somebody sees you as their friend, you know, your heart totally opens up and you want to have a nice relationship with that person. So we can do that too. And when we see everyone as our friend and we see everyone as equal and wanting to be happy and not wanting to suffer, then we're not coming anymore from a place of our attachment or aversion, but we're coming from a place which is in accordance with reality. And we're coming from a place where we nourish and cherish the relationship that we have with each and every sentient being. And so from that place, we can develop love for each and every sentient being. We can develop the wish for each and every being to be happy. We can develop the wish for each and everybody to be free from suffering. But to make a start with that, we need to apply reasoning. Without a reasoning, the attachment mind is just there and has its likings and its not likings, right? That is very limited. So we want to open up the mind so that we include everyone. Sometimes His Holiness says, you know, if you're just benefiting yourself, this is what we do, right, the whole day. Attachment and aversion is at work in order to benefit me. That's what we do the whole day, which means that I use my energy for only one person. But if I can turn that around and I say, I want to work for the benefit of all sentient beings, my benefit becomes so much bigger, because the merit that I'm going to make by benefiting all sentient beings, even that wish, is so vast, because you generate merit and dependence on each and every sentient being. So if we can develop that mind, if we can get over our biased mind, if we can see that the biased mind is just bringing suffering to us, you know, we can open up the heart, we can open up the mind, and we can connect with qualities in ourselves that we maybe never knew that they were there. And so when we start working for the benefit of all sentient beings, you know, then whatever happens to me is really not that important. It becomes very small. And so in order to think about how we generate, how we do that mind transformation, right? So you can look into the text that teach you about how to develop bodhicitta mind, which you can find in the Lamrim, or you can read Shantideva's text, the Bodhisattva Charya. That is all about how do we develop that bodhicitta mind, you know. This is not coming overnight. This takes effort. This takes practice. This takes remembering that we can do things in a different way. And then train mind. His Holiness, he says he meditates, I think he gets up at 3:30 in the morning, and then he meditates 4 or 5 hours. And a lot of that meditation is on developing bodhicitta, 4 or 5 hours a day. So that is, if you want to become like him, that's how we need to apply ourselves, you know. But you start where you are. So don't start 5 hours a day, start 15 minutes, half an hour a day that you consciously think about. And once you know how to generate a bodhicitta mind, you can start looking into texts like the 8 verses of mind training, or the 7-point mind training, 8 verses of mind transformation, we say. I think so, mind transformation. The 7-point mind training, or the 37 attitudes of a bodhisattva. These texts all help us transform our attitude into an attitude that wishes to benefit all sentient beings. So that is counteracting the self-cherishing mind. I have that overview, and I think to stop. Overview of where you can work. My connection is unstable, or is it okay? It looks okay. So if you look into all the options that you have in order to counteract yourself, the mind that is causing problems, it is not one thing. You can counteract that on many levels. So I would say start where you are. You know, if you have a big problem with one of the disturbing emotions, start with that one, to recognize it, to bring your mind to the present moment when it arises. You know, start with one thing and apply yourself to a kind of training for a while and see what happens. And then when you feel ready, you can start going deeper into the underlying causes of having that strong delusion arising in your mind. And so, I don't know, you can also go every day through all the options, you know, and think, oh yeah, I could do this and this and this and this and this. Or you do a little meditation on each part. It depends on what you feel is beneficial for your mind. And I think in order to really connect with your mind, you know, we first need to sit down, sit with our own mind and say, what's going on? Really listen, what's going on? what am I feeling? What is happening in my thinking? And sit with that for a while and accept that and be non-judgmental with that. Just sit with that. That's what's going on. Then after that, you start applying antidotes. All right. So I don't know if I should leave it like this. And then we still have a meditation. If you have any questions, please feel free to ask. I think the biggest trick is that we transform, that mechanism that we have that reacts with attachment and aversion, that we transform that one into, we actually turn it around. And in the meditation, we'll meditate on that, how you can do that. And that is, and I know that you all have heard of that. It is, you eventually want to go to the Tonglen practice. The Tonglen is turning our normal mechanism for finding happiness that actually only brings suffering into the mechanism that brings us happiness all the time. And so we can apply that to ourselves. And then from there, start to apply it to others. And I thought today we can do the meditation where we just apply that to ourselves. And then you can use that to sort out your own mind. And then from there, slowly, slowly, you start to apply it to others. Wishing ourselves to be free of suffering is a wish that is very allowed, If we do not wish ourselves to be free of suffering, how can we wish anyone else to be free of suffering? Wishing others to be free of suffering is based on our own knowledge about suffering and our own wish to be free of that. And then we say, just like me, everybody else wants to be free of suffering. Okay, so I call that self-compassion, but it's not really in Buddhism that we speak about that. We talk about renunciation, which I think might be very similar. And then the Tonglen, what they say, the teachers, they say that if you want to apply it to yourself, you always start the Tonglen with applying it to yourself. And when you feel that you are done, not really done, but you feel that you are okay, then you go to others, not before that. So this is not made up by me, this is really coming from the teachers. Okay. So let's find a posture that is comfortable. And let all the words that you have heard slide off you. For now, there's no need to remember. Be aware of your body. Be aware of your breath. And then bring your mind to a problem that is currently troubling you. And if you're not familiar with this practice, then it is best to start with a small or medium-sized problem rather than your biggest one. So your problem could be a physical problem, like a painful or uncomfortable feeling or an illness. Or it could be something emotional, such as sadness, hurt, or loneliness. Allow the problem to arise in your mind. And feel how painful it is. And maybe you can also see your aversion trying to push away the problem. So then talk kindly to yourself and try to let go of your resistance to having this problem. Be gentle with yourself. Acknowledge that you are suffering. Somehow life has brought you that. You received it. So when you breathe in, visualize that you accept that that is yours. Allow it to come closer. Every time you breathe in, you take it on more. And you feel that it is your responsibility to take that problem. Then think, I am not the only person in the world experiencing a problem like this. There are many others. And think of other people who may be experiencing the same or a similar problem. Some to an even greater degree than yourself. Generate compassion for them, thinking and really feeling how wonderful it would be if all those people could be free from their suffering. And then decide that you take on your own experience of this problem with a compassionate wish that by doing so, all those other people will be free from their suffering. Let go of your resistance, your fear, and your aversion towards the problem. Breathe the problem in. With each breath, you take it on more. And feel that by doing so, your mind becomes more peaceful. Allow your mind to rest in a gentle, peaceful acceptance of it. And then we can use this technique also for problems of suffering that will happen in the future. For instance, you are afraid of illness that might come in the future, or your own death, or maybe you're going to lose your job, or maybe you're afraid of, I don't know, we can be afraid of many things. You know, sometimes we have the fear that something might happen to us. And so you can use that and bring that to the present moment by breathing it in and say, okay, when that happens, it's okay. I'll take it on. And so you can, in the meditation, start taking it on already right now. All the worries that you have about the future, whether you're going to cope or not, whether you have that ability. And so all the suffering that you see ahead of you, you breathe already in the present moment. And you can say, if that is what is going to happen to me, I accept and I'll take it on. And so as soon as we let go our resistance, and we stay kind to ourselves, the mind becomes more peaceful. And maybe there are certain experiences from the past that you find difficult to process because they're too painful or confusing. So you can also take them and say, it did happen to me. I take responsibility for that. And by letting go your resistance, your fear, your aversion, and then the mind can rest in a gentle, peaceful acceptance. And over time, when you become more familiar with this practice and you feel comfortable with yourself, in yourself, you apply to yourself, then you can extend taking on the problems and sufferings to other people. First, the problems and suffering of those that you love and like, then of those that you don't know so well, the so-called strangers, and eventually those that have harmed you. And so you build it up in a way that you feel comfortable with what you're doing. You don't take on more than you can. This is a training of the mind. So we don't have to do the heavy lifting right from the beginning. And then we can dedicate all the merits that we have created today by listening, reflecting, meditating. But we can also dedicate the merits from the other 3 evenings that we did by thinking that may what we did become a course for us to develop our potential of wisdom and compassion more and more. So that we become skilled more and more with others. And may that potential that we have develop in a way that it's going to give us the ability to benefit each and every person, each and every sentient being. Because we are all suffering. We are all bound by our delusions. We all have the wish to be free of that suffering. We all want to be free, free of bondage. And so whatever we did during these 4 weeks, may that become a cause for that freedom. Freedom from suffering, freedom from bondage for all sentient beings. And the attainment of stable, blissful happiness. For all sentient beings. And then I want to thank you all, especially Tara Meditation Center for having me. I hope somehow, that you all did receive some benefit. It's not the same as being with you all. I prefer actually to be present, but if the situation is that we can't do that, I think this is a good second option. So thank you very much. You're going to try to do that? Thank you. Thank you very much. It's received. I'll turn your mic on if you want. Wait.
Now we're unmuted. You can hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Right, very good. I just wanted to say on behalf of everybody, Venerable Jamyang, it would be much nicer to have you here in person, but it's been so lovely having you there on the TV screen giving us this teaching. So, whoops, there you are still. I've really enjoyed this especially. I think everybody has. And this year that Big Love came out all about Lama Yeshe's life and how much Lama Yeshe wanted all of us, even those of us who didn't meet him, to take that as part of our practice, become our own therapist. So it was lovely to have that unpacked by you. We very much enjoy your teaching, and we hope that one day you will be able to come back again in person and teach us in the Gompa. But in the meantime,
hope so too.
That's very good. It's been lovely.
Yes.
So thank you very much.
Thank you very much all for having me and for doing the work, and I hope that that you will have some benefits, that you can become friends with your own mind and I think the better we can deal with what is arising in the mind, the better we relate to ourselves, the less problems we're going to have. You know, and I think you talk about big love. I think once we do that, the big love can really start arising from our heart and our mind.
A delightful idea.
Yes. I want to go for that. And I want you to go for that as well.
Thank you so much.
Okay. Welcome. Thank you.
Stay safe and bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye.